Welcome to Vosy History, where we explore the hidden possibilities of history. Tonight, we step into an alternate world, shaped by one different choice, one tiny change, one impossible question. Imagine a world where one of the deadliest events in human history never happened. No deserted streets, no mass graves, no sudden silence falling over continents. In this alternate world, the Black Death, the plague that erased up to half of Europe, simply passes us by. Tonight, we step into that world, a world where history bends, a world where humanity grows, too fast, too early, and where the consequences echo across centuries. Before we imagine the alternate world, we must walk briefly through our own. The Black Death arrived in Europe in 1347. Within 4 years, entire cities emptied. Fields went wild. Trade collapsed. Kings and peasants died alike. Historians estimate that between 75 and 200 million people were lost. Europe shrank. The world grew quieter. And centuries of social, political, and cultural change followed, all triggered by a microscopic enemy. But what if the bacteria failed to mutate? What if the fleas died off early? What if the conditions for a pandemic simply never aligned? What if the Black Death never happened? In our alternate timeline, the year is 1346. Deep in the plains of Central Asia, a shift happens, not in armies nor in kings, but in the tiny world of microorganisms. The plague bacterium fails to survive a sudden climate change. The flea populations collapse during an unusually harsh winter. The disease spreads, yes, but never violently enough to leave its mark on history. Merchants still carry goods across the Silk Road. Genoese ships still sail across the Black Sea. Life continues, unaware of the catastrophe it narrowly avoided. Europe steps into 1347 untouched and unprepared for what this means. Because removing the Black Death removes the reset button of medieval society. In our timeline, Europe's population collapsed so deeply that it took over 200 years to recover. But in this alternate world, population keeps rising, quickly. By 1400, Europe is dangerously crowded. Cities swell beyond their medieval limits. Food demand surges. Famine becomes more common. Rulers struggle to maintain order. This is a Europe that grows not through opportunity, but through pressure. Consequences. Feudalism survives longer. With no labor shortage, peasants gain no bargaining power. Serfdom remains strong. Land becomes scarce. Younger sons inherit nothing. Families compete. Social tensions rise. Migration becomes explosive. Europe searches desperately for new land and finds it overseas. In this timeline, colonial expansion begins earlier, not driven by curiosity, but by necessity. The Black Death destroyed lives, but it also destroyed traditional structures. Labor shortages encouraged innovation, wages rose, cities rebuilt, wealth shifted. In this alternate world, none of that happens. Technological consequences. The Renaissance arrives 50 to 100 years later. Mechanization slows. Eyeglasses, printing, clocks, and shipbuilding develop more slowly. Universities stay controlled by conservative elites. Scientific curiosity rises, but more cautiously. In short, Europe enters the 1400s more crowded, more stressed, and less advanced. But one invention still changes everything: gunpowder. And without the plague's economic shock, gunpowder spreads much slower. Europe becomes more violent, but less innovative. By the mid 1400s, Europe faces a crisis. Too many people, too little land, no economic rebound, and so the pressure builds toward the oceans. Portugal begins exploring the African coast earlier. Spain, desperate for new lands, pushes exploration in the 1430s instead of the 1490s. What this means: the Americas are reached decades earlier. Indigenous civilizations encounter Europeans long before their peak. Disease exchange happens even more devastatingly because Europeans bring more population pressure and less medical understanding. The world map begins reshaping faster than in our timeline, but with a Europe that is technologically weaker and politically unstable. This creates a far more chaotic global outcome. In our world, the Black Death damaged the Mongol Empire and redirected trade patterns. But in this alternate world, the Mongol fragments last longer. Ottoman expansion slows. The Islamic Golden Age continues further. China remains a stable world superpower. Without Europe rising as quickly, the global balance of power becomes more Asian-centered. China's naval expeditions under Zheng He continue for decades longer. Indian Ocean trade flourishes. Africa becomes richer earlier. Europe is no longer the main driver of world history. It is simply one of several powerful regions. By 1700, the ripple effects have fully reshaped the globe. Europe, still crowded, still dominated by old monarchies. Scientific revolution delayed, industrial revolution far away. Asia, technologically superior, economically dominating world trade, stronger centralized empires. Americas, colonized earlier, but by weaker powers. Indigenous survival slightly higher due to fragmented colonization. Africa, trade networks more balanced, less European domination early on. This is a multipolar world, a world with many competing centers of power, and now we reach the final stage. Imagine our modern world shaped by these centuries of change. 1. Technology. The Industrial Revolution begins in the mid-1800s, not 1700s. Today's technology is 100 to 150 years behind. 2. Global power. Asia dominates the 20th century. Europe is divided, traditional, and less influential. 3. Medicine. Without the shock of the Black Death, epidemiology advances later. Pandemics remain more frequent. 4. Culture. The Renaissance happens in the 1600s. Classical music, art, architecture, all shift forward by centuries. 5. Population. The world is much more crowded today, perhaps by 2 to 3 billion more people. A world shaped not by one enormous tragedy, but by the absence of it. The Black Death was a human catastrophe, a wound in the history of our species. But in its wake, society reshaped itself. Innovation accelerated, land opened, ideas spread, new worlds were discovered, new voices were heard. Remove the tragedy, and we remove the transformation. History is fragile. It turns on the smallest things: a climate shift, a mutation, a single tiny organism. And sometimes the greatest changes happen not because something occurred, but because it easily could have not. Fade out. Thank you for watching this journey into an alternate past. If you'd like more worlds like this, subscribe and tell me which what if we should explore next. Until then, history remains full of possibilities.